Okay, this is probably the last official document that I'm going to share. What I mean by official document is just that I have rewritten and illustrated in an aesthetic fashion in order to make things more intelligible the formal structure, the table of contents, one might say, of Die Wissenschaft der Logik. And here it is what is ordinarily called the greater logic, namely the logic which was officially published between 1812 and 1816, which is, in the words of Hegel, one might say, this is the presentation of God before the creation of the world and a finite mind. So this is the mind of God in all its complexity. I'm not sure that it's rigorously how God thinks, but it's as close as you can get to the thinking of the entity that people call God. Maybe it can be changed or improved or complexified. No, please, no more complexity. We'll see, but yeah, so I will I have been working on this because I intended to use this to give theoretical lectures, and I will, I think, give a couple or a few at least theoretical lectures, but then it will become the public property of the substance, to talk like a moment of the development. So here are the colors that I've used. So in blue, these are the Teilen. So here we are no longer, for those who may have just watched or have watched at some moment the encyclopedia, we are not in the encyclopedia anymore. This is the science of logic, in two books, the greater logic, what is called usually the greater logic. So the Teilen do not refer to the Teilen of the encyclopedia. So here we have two Teilen in blue, or blau, or bleu in German and French. These are pages 2 to 3. Bücher, so the books, Buch, Bücher, the books in red. The Abschnitten, which are the divisions in a way, in orange. These are the pages 6 to 9, and the chapters, Kapitel, in green. These are pages 10 to 19, and then the subdivision ABC in black, and these are the remaining pages. So in the first moment, I will show the structure first in broad outline, and I will go into more detail each time. And in the second part of the video, I will show I would say the chronological, but actually no, the logical unfolding of the categories. But first, I show the most universal categories, then the particular Bestimmtheiten, the particular divisions, and I go into more and more detail to help understand the structure. Here I can use an anecdote. It is sometimes said by some scholars that Die Kritik der reinen Vernunft, the book by Kant about the theoretical faculties of reason, is a philosophical cathedral. So a good philosophical book is like a cathedral in a way. It's a work of art, but one has to see the architecture, the structure, and that's what I will try to show in this video. Okay, so here we have the major divisions of Die Wissenschaft der Logik. We have two Teilen. These are the pages 2 to 3, and these two Teilen are the objective Logik, the objective logic, which is the erster Teil 1 out of 2, and the zweiter Teil is die subjektive Logik oder die Lehre vom Begriff. So the objective Logik contains die Lehre vom Sein und die Lehre vom Wesen, so the doctrine of being and the doctrine of essence, and the doctrine of the concept is contained in the subjective Logik. So in the words of the preface, the objective Logik could be considered metaphysics, and the subjective logic as such, but it's way too simplified, but that's what's in the preface. So these are the two Teilen, the two major divisions or distinctions of the science of logic, the greater logic. Okay. Okay, so here we have pages 4 to 5 in red. We have the books. Buch means the book, and Bücher, the books. So there are actually 2 books, but then it depends on the edition. But in the edition that I have in German, there were 2 books. Erstes Buch, Die Lehre vom Sein. Zweites Buch, Die Lehre vom Wesen. So these are the division of, I will go back up just to show, the division of the Objektive Logik. And the zweiter Teil is not a third book, it's a zweiter Teil. So the 2 Bücher, the 2 books, are Die Lehre vom Sein and Die Lehre vom Wesen. Okay. Okay, so now the Abschnitten are the sections in orange. So there are 9 Abschnitten, one must say. This number is related to the size of the scripture. It's not really important. The number here is there are 9 Abschnitten in Die Wissenschaft der Logik. So these are the pages 6 to 9. There are 46 pages in my document. So here I have reproduced the overall structure each time. So I have already talked about erster Teil, die Objektive Logik. The first division is die Lehre vom Sein, and die Lehre vom Sein is divided in 3 Abschnitten, 3 sections: Bestimmtheit oder Qualität, Determinacy or quality. Here it's determinateness, but I use the word determinacy, but that's Bestimmtheit, Qualität. That's 1 out of 9 Abschnitten. Zweiter Abschnitt, die Größe, Quantität, which in English apparently is translated by magnitude, die Größe, yeah. And dritter Abschnitt, das Maß, which is measure. So these are the 3 first Abschnitten sections of the science of logic. And here, zweites Buch, second book, Die Lehre vom Wesen, we have the 3 following subsequent Abschnitten. Das Wesen als Reflexion in ihm selbst, so the essence as reflection in itself. Here again, that's the English translation. I'm not sure that it's the more adequate. Maybe it will help English people understand, but that's why I speak German, because I understand better sometimes. Zweiter Abschnitt. So it's the zweiter Abschnitt of the zweites Buch, but actually it's the 5th out of 9. I hope that you follow. And dritter Abschnitt, die Wirklichkeit. So we find the major thought determinations are the same as those found in the logic of the encyclopedia, but there are more determinations. It's more determined, precisely. It's more accurate, more rigorous, one might say, more systematized. But these thought determinations, Wesen, Reflexion, Erscheinung, etc., are also found in the shorter logic, one might say. And then in the zweiter Teil, die subjektive Logik oder die Lehre vom Begriff, we find the final 3 Abschnitten, which are erster, zweiter, and dritter, within the sphere of the subjective logic. Here it's die Subjektivität, die Objektivität und die Idee. So I will just pause and show again the 9 Abschnitten in an overview. Okay, so the 9 sections are Bestimmtheit, Größe, das Maß, das Wesen als Reflexion in ihm selbst, die Erscheinung, die Wirklichkeit, and finally die Subjektivität, die Objektivität und die Idee. Okay, so now I can go to the more determined divisions. Okay, so here in green we have the capitals, the chapters, and there are 27 chapters. So there were 9 Abschnitten, 9 sections. Each is subdivided in 3 chapters. So 9 multiplied by 3 gives 27. So pages 10 to 19 will have all the chapters. So here I have not reproduced the Teil and the Buch, so the part and the book. It's just the Abschnitt, what we have just seen previously. So here, first section 1 out of 9, it contains 3 chapters. Sein, Dasein, für sich sein. Here, these are the same as those of the logic of the encyclopedia. I will not go into full detail. I will pause enough to see. But yeah, okay. Zweiter Abschnitt, 2 out of 9. Here, the chapters are die Quantität, Quantum und das quantitative Verhältnis. And as long as I publish video, I will illustrate and explain what these categories mean. Of course, it's unintelligible without an oral explanation. As Hegel would say, because in the encyclopedia it's written that this is just the formal structure, it has to be clarified by lectures, basically. Okay, so I continue. Dritter Abschnitt, so 3 out of 9. It is again divided in 3 subdivisions, which are called chapters, Kapitel. We have die spezifische Quantität, das reale Maß und das Werden des Wesens. So here, for instance, these chapters are not present in the section about measure of the encyclopedia, the logic of the encyclopedia. So here it's more specified, one might say it's more determined, more detailed, more rigorous, more richer, wealthier in determinations, etc., etc. That's why it's sometimes called the greater logic. It has more determinations. Okay, I continue. So here we have erster Abschnitt of the book about Wesen. That's why it's the 4th out of 9, and again it is divided in 3 chapters. Der Schein, which is I'm not sure that it's the proper English word. I understand in French and in German, but yeah, because there is, here I will talk briefly about language, there is Schein und Erscheinung, which could be translated sometimes as appearance, apparition. They are not the same. When something appears and something seems, these are different meaning in the English language, and these are actually logical determinations. Because when something appears, it is not, when an appearance is precisely not what things really are, whereas an apparition is the manifestation of something. Here it's quite poor from a philosophical standpoint, but just to illustrate. Anyway, then die Wesenheiten oder die Reflexionsbestimmungen und der Grund. So we find the same Reflexionsbestimmungen as in the logic of the encyclopedia, but the structure is slightly different, and difference is Reflexionsbestimmung. Okay, zweiter Abschnitt of the logic of essence, so 5 out of 9 in the whole process of logic, not the encyclopedia, but just the logic, the greater logic. The chapters are die Existenz, die Erscheinung und das wesentliche Verhältnis, the essential relation. So here, to illustrate again, Erscheinung, which is translated by appearance or phénomène in French, which is a word that we also find in German and in English, phenomenon and phénomène in German, I will just go back up slightly, is different from der Schein, which is shine apparently, or l'apparence. So it seems useless subtleties, but actually is very important because it is the very structure of reality, the manifestation of the mind of God. But it's not the manifestation, it's the mind of God which is being made manifest. And in order to understand God and reality, one has to understand these determinations. Yeah. Okay, dritter Abschnitt, die Wirklichkeit, 6 out of 9. And here the chapters are das Absolut, die Wirklichkeit und das absolute Verhältnis. And these are not present in the shorter logic precisely. Erster Abschnitt of the subjective logic, which is the second part, Teil, but it's not a book, strictly speaking, it's the second Teil. So here we have der Begriff, das Urteil und der Schluss, so concept, judgment, syllogism, 19, 20, and 21 out of 27 chapters of the whole process. Die Objektivität, here we find the same divisions as in the shorter logic. First chapter is Der Mechanismus, Der Chemismus, chemism, and Teleology, or Teleologie in German. Yeah, and the last three chapters in the dritte Abschnitt, which is the 9th out of 9, we find the chapters about das Leben, which is life, die Idee des Erkennens, und die absolute Idee. And why do we find life in logic? Because it is self-moving, it's self-initiating, self-reproducing, it is alive, basically. That's just one illustration, but I could comment, but the purpose is not to make a lecture, a theoretical lecture on logic, it's just to give the document, which might be used, because it doesn't seem like work, and actually it's not really work, but it has taken me quite a lot of time to structure, organize, and it might enable English-speaking person, German-speaking person, and French-speaking persons to see the structure in an intelligible way, in a sense. So I will stop here for the chapters, Kapitel, and I will now go to more divisions. Okay, so here we find, let's call it subdivisions, subsections, capital letters. It's not really important. The name is irrelevant. It's just the logical process of determination, I say. So A, B, C in capital letters. There are 78 letters. Let's call these letters. And these are the pages 20 to 46. And the last page of this document is 46. So here's what it looks like. So here we find first chapter, Sein, which itself is contained in the first Abschnitt of the first book of the first Teil. Hopefully it's not too complex at this moment. I have not reproduced every time the Abschnitt is 1 out of 27. If you want, I will do this just for this one. I will go back up to show where Sein is, so it would be here. Sein is the first chapter of the first Abschnitt of the first book of the first Teil. So 1 out of 9, 1 out of 27. And now I will go back down to show that yeah, we are in the subdivision, subsection of Sein, which is divided in 3 letters, Sein, Nichts, Werden. And these are the categories that people use ordinarily and daily to think about the world, for instance. It's more intelligible when it is more detailed in a way. Yeah. Okay. Second chapter, 2 out of 27, Dasein. The categories of Dasein are Dasein as such, die Endlichkeit, Finitude, what is finite, und die Unendlichkeit, infinity. 4, 5, and 6 out of 78. Okay. The letters, or the divisions, the subsections, the sub categories, whatever, not categories, but the sub parts of the third chapter, that's für sich sein. Für sich sein als solches, being for itself or being for self as such, the one and the many, eins und vieles, and one and many are categories that people use in ordinary language constantly. But where do these categories come from? Well, they are the second letter of the third chapter of the... Don't ask me the number of the Abschnitt, because right now I don't know it by heart. But the purpose is not to learn this by heart in a mechanistical way. Precisely, the numbers, I have added them. It's not numerology. The Hegel's philosophy is not numerology. The numbers are not important. They are here to facilitate the understanding, but the purpose is to understand eventually how the categories of one and many, unity, it's not really unity, but eventually unity and multiplicity, where do they emerge? How come that we use these categories consciously or unconsciously to think about the world, and how come that they are also structures of the real? So the logic explains. Repulsion and attraction, these are categories that are used every day. Not the words can be different, but the categories are used, and we find repulsion and attraction in physics, the electromagnetic forces, positive and negative electric charges, the opposite poles of the magnetic force, etc., etc. We find this in physics, in chemistry, and in psychology, in politics, etc., etc. Okay, die Quantität. 4 chapter out of 27, and the 3 letters here, 3 subdivisions are die reine Quantität, pure quantity, kontinuierliche und diskrete Größe, continuous and discrete magnitude, and Begrenzung der Quantität, the limiting of quantity. So pure quantity, continuity, discretion, and the limiting of quantity, basically. Okay, quantum, the chapter about das Quantum. The categories of das Quantum are the number, die Zahl, the extensives und intensives Quantum, so extensive and intensive quantum, and the quantitative infinity. Yeah. So this is very useful because in the developed world, the categories of quantity are used daily, percentages, numbers, increase, decrease, relationships of ratios, etc., etc. They are used daily everywhere, but it's one thing to recognize them and then to understand how they emerge in the mind of God and in the mind of human beings, and to use them properly in a way. Drittes Kapitel, 6 out of 27, das quantitative Verhältnis. So here we have das Direktverhältnis, das umgekehrte Verhältnis, und Potenzverhältnis, the ratio of powers, the inverse ratio, the direct ratio. Here I just illustrate ratio. The more one, this is an idea that I borrowed from Whitehead, the more one elevates oneself in the realm of pure abstraction, in the realm of mathematics, but it's true of logic as well, the more one elevates oneself in the realm of pure abstraction, the more one understands a broad range of phenomena. So there is a ratio, a relationship between abstraction and the understanding of concrete realities, because intensity and extension are conceptually united. Yeah, okay. Then we have the division of das Maß, which are not present in the shorter logic. So here is die spezifische Quantität, specific quantity, the specific quantum, specifying measure, and das für sich Sein im Maße, the being for itself in measure. These subdivisions are not present in the shorter logic. Okay, zweites Kapitel, das reale Maß, real measure, das Verhältnis selbstständiger Maße, the relation of independent measures, Knotenlinie von Maßverhältnissen, nodal lines of measure, I'm not sure, no. Yeah, probably that. Das Maßlos, the measureless, or the loss of measure. So, yeah, these are the subdivisions of measure. And we find this in mathematics, in physics, chemistry, economics, politics, yeah, because these are the fundamental determination of being, and these are ontological determinations, so they are found in every being, one might say. If I wanted to make a joke, I would say to a certain extent, because a certain extent is probably spezifische Quantum, or Maßlos, or whatever. Yeah. So there is, in case, I mean, at some moment people will probably watch this video and understand that there is a logical relationship between language and logic itself. Yeah. Okay. Das Werden des Wesens, the becoming of essence, die absolute Indifferenz, die absolute Indifference, Indifferenz als umgekehrtes Verhältnis ihrer Faktoren, Indifference as inverse ratio of its factors, Übergang in das Wesen, transition into essence. So that's how being transition into essence, so to speak. So there are 27 letters in the logic of being, and 9 chapters and 3 Abschnitten. So now we will go to the logic of essence. Okay, so here we are in the logic of essence. So I just showed the transition from the 9th chapter to the 10th is the transition from being to essence. This is the first chapter of the logic of essence. The subdivision here are the essential and the unessential, der Schein und die Reflexion. Yeah. Then, second chapter, die Wesenheiten oder die Reflexionsbestimmungen, Identität, Unterschied, Widerspruch, identity, difference, contradiction. So here we do not have ground, but contradiction. So it's different from the shorter logic. Here we have der Grund, the ground, der absolute Grund, der bestimmte Grund, die Bedingung. So we have the condition here. Okay. We have existence, 13 out of 27. The thing and its properties, das Ding und seine Eigenschaften. Das Bestehen des Dings aus Materien, the fact that the thing is constituted or consists in matters, not matter but matters, and the dissolution of the thing, basically. I will illustrate, because as of now it's totally unintelligible, I know, but actually it talks about what we call reality, about these are mostly used in physics and chemistry, but yeah. Okay, die Erscheinung, 14th out of 27th chapter, so the law of der Erscheinung, just here to illustrate the law of appearance, this simply explains why. Because it is logically deduced from the process of the unfolding of the categories why there are laws to the phenomena, that which every scientist, most of them do not like German metaphysics. It's not that they do not like, it's that they have disdain or they don't even consider it worthy of being studied, German metaphysics, but all scientists, at least in the hard sciences like physics, chemistry, biology, they acknowledge that the phenomena, that which appears, is not without regularity. They acknowledge that the laws cannot always be known or accurately known or conceptualized, but that there are laws, that the movement of the planets, the fall of objects, the reproduction of animals obeys certain laws. And here is explained in the mind of the unfolding of the mind of God why there are laws to the phenomena. Yeah. Die erscheinende und die an sich seiende Welt. Here another illustration, very simply in 20 seconds. The physicists, some say that the whole phenomenal world is just a manifestation of the four fundamental forces of physics and their laws and quantitative determination. So there is the world of phenomena, which would be die erscheinende Welt, und die an sich seiende Welt would be the world of the laws and the forces of physics. So here it's for the physicist, basically. The dissolution of appearance. But the purpose of logic is to show that these two worlds are only separated in the mind of the Anglo-Saxon physicist with his verstandisch understanding of things. In the mind of the German metaphysician, they are divided, but one nonetheless, so to speak. Okay, das wesentliche Verhältnis. So here again we have. I will illustrate. The purpose was not to comment, but just to illustrate with ordinary talk. Das Verhältnis des Ganzen und der Teile, the whole and its parts. These are categories that people use daily: a totality or a whole and the parts. Kraft und ihre Äußerung. It's used by the physicists mostly, but also the psychologists. Gravitational force, electromagnetic force, etc., etc., or the strength of character. It's a force of the psyche in a way. Und des Äußeren und Inneren, the outer and the inner, it's used daily. The outside and the inside, the outer and the inner. So, but they do not these categories that people use daily. They do not randomly pop out of God knows where, but they are a moment in the process of the unfolding of the categories which structure the categories and the Reflexionsbestimmungen, the concept which structure the mind of the entity that we call God, basically. Okay. das Absolut. So here we have die Auslegung des Absoluten, the exposition of the Absolute, das absolute Attribut, the absolute attribute, der Modus des Absoluten. So here it's the logic reworking the philosophy of Spinoza, basically. Attribute, mode are categories not in the rigorous sense of the philosophy, the science of logic, but thought determination of the philosophy of Spinoza, attributes and modes. That's how they emerge in the mind of God. So here is the birth of Spinoza, so to speak. That's a little joke. No, because if Spinoza could talk, he would say, no, I was not born in the attribute or in the modes, but in the cause of itself. I understand. Here I will make a joke which might become famous, but it's possible that the greatest German ever gave birth to maybe the greatest Jew ever. Maybe some say the greatest Jew ever is Jesus. Some would say it might be Spinoza. I don't know, but that's a private joke. Yeah. Which maybe will become public someday. Because if I wanted to make a joke, we say private is inner, public is outer, and since inner and outer are one, private jokes will become public, etc. Someday, whatever people say against whoever or whatever I am, they might be forced to acknowledge he had a good sense of humor. At least sometimes. In his best moments, he was genuinely funny. Well, okay. So, die Wirklichkeit. Here, just to illustrate, Zufälligkeit, Wirklichkeit, Möglichkeit, Notwendigkeit. This is the table of categories of Kant. What a generation of scholars have had to study, and students have had to study. And here is we had Spinoza popping out of this chapter, and now we have the mind of Kant, not the psychology of Immanuel Kant, the 18th century philosopher, but the table of categories, which is the transcendental self, so to speak. So these are some of the categories in the language of Kant, and this is how they emerge within the mind of God, basically. So Kant was not an idiot, not a complete idiot, which shouldn't come as a surprise, but yeah. So yeah, Wirklichkeit, so possibility, necessity, contingency, and Wirklichkeit. Okay. Then there is das absolute Verhältnis. Das Verhältnis der Substantialität, das Kausalitätsverhältnis. So here again, Spinoza, substance and cause, which are important categories in the philosophy of Spinoza. Here is how they emerge in the mind of God from a formal standpoint. And then die Wechselwirkung, reciprocity of action. Okay. Der Begriff, the concept. So I will just stop there for a moment. 33. Okay, so now we have transitioned from the logic of essence to the logic of the concept. And here it's 19th out of 27. So the first 9 chapters were the logic of being. 10 to 18 was the logic of essence, and 19 to 27 are the chapters about the logic of the concept. And here the letters are allgemeiner Begriff, the universal concept, besonderer Begriff, das Einzelne, particular, universal, particular, singular, UPS. Yeah. Okay, das Urteil, the judgment, das Urteil des Daseins, das Urteil der Reflexion, das Urteil der Notwendigkeit, das Urteil des Begriffs. So here we have 4 letters. But it's not random, there's a reason for that. So yeah, and here again we find the table of judgments of die Kritik der reinen Vernunft. That's why Die Wissenschaft der Logik contains most, if not all, other philosophers. Aristotle, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, etc., etc. Der Schluss, the syllogism, Schluss des Daseins, der Schluss der Reflexion, der Schluss der Notwendigkeit. And this is unfolding. I mean, when the process is understood and explained, it unfolds organically, in a living way, in a self-initiating process. There is a logic at work. That's why in the writings of Hegel we find constant complaints about classical logicians who use these determinations without justifying or explaining how these determinations of rationality, where do they come from, why they use these ones and not others, etc. Here everything is rigorously, I mean, this is just the table of contents, but in the actual process everything is rigorously proven, demonstrated, etc., etc. So this is a rigorous thinking, one might say. Der Mechanismus, das mechanische Objekt, der mechanische Prozess, der absolute Mechanismus. This is one of the reasons why it's very difficult, if not downright impossible, to understand the philosophy of nature if one doesn't understand the logic, because nature is structured according to the determinations of the idée, the mind of God, basically. That's why the physicists begin by investigating nature as a mechanistic object, precisely, yeah, where the Anglo-Saxon mind begins, it's the 22nd moment of the mind of the German metaphysician, basically. Yeah. Der Chemismus, the same, das chemische Objekt, der chemische Prozess, Übergang des Chemismus, transition of chemism. Just to illustrate, because as long as I make videos, I will not make videos like these anymore, because in the next video I will either comment my personal writings or make lectures. But the simple reason why nature is rational, that which scientists know, is because mechanics, or the mechanical process and chemism are logically deduced from the unfolding of logic itself. That's why nature is rational, because nature is the image of the mind of God, basically. Drittes Kapitel, Teleologie, so here der subjektive Zweck, das Mittel, der ausgeführte Zweck, so the subjective purpose, the means, and the realized purpose. And it has not been detailed enough, maybe we'll see that later, but the categories of causes, the four causes of Aristotle, formal, material, efficient, and final, they are found within the logic. That's why the categories of Aristotle, the categories of Spinoza, of Leibniz, and of Kant, and others as well, are found in the mind of God. If I wanted to make a poetic, it's not a joke, it's a poetic remark, that the mind of God is filled with great minds. Yeah. Das Leben, das lebendige Individuum, der Lebensprozess, die Gattung, so the genus, the life process and the living individual. Yeah. I will make the joke that I thought about. Oy vey, we have already gender problems in the mind of God. God has already thought about feminism, mictos, transgenders. Yeah. I laugh, but actually it's very serious. I will detail this in my next videos, but the categories of gender, or genus, emerges from the process of God, so to speak. Die Idee des Erkennens, die Idee des Wahren, the idea of the true, die Idee des Guten, the idea of the good. Thank God, there is good in God. There is also the negative, that's what brings forth the process, but eventually there is also good. Yeah, the absolute Idee, the absolute ID. Okay. So, yeah. I will paused off or pause now here, but I will show the same determinations in a different form, in the logical unfolding. So the video will be very long, but I will put the link in the description, namely that it enables to have the two perspectives. It's the detailed perspective, and now I will show the logical unfolding. Yeah. Okay, so these are the same categories, but simply here it's really a table of contents as could be found in the book, Die Wissenschaft der Logik, but there are various editions, but anyway. So here it's not Teilen, then Bücher, then Abschnitten, then Teil, Bücher, Abschnitte. It's the unfolding of the process. So I will go a little bit faster, but simply to show what can be found in the book, so to speak. But there are also more thought determinations, namely 1, 2, 3, small ABC, and alpha, beta, gamma. And here the numbers are just the size of the writing. It's not on the right. It's the number of. There are 2 Teilen, 2 Bücher, 9 Abschnitten, 27 chapters, and 78 ABC letters. But here 10 or 12 or 14 is just the size of the writings. So it's not. It's just to help facilitate the aesthetic presentation. So okay. Yeah, die Objektive Logik, die Lehre vom Sein, Bestimmtheit, Qualität. So here we have Sein, Sein, Nichts, Werden. And here they were not present in the first part of the video. The categories or the moment of becoming are the unity of being and nothing, the moment of becoming, and the Aufheben of becoming. Then Dasein, so that's the same thing, but it's simply in the logical order. I just comment these are not the news; it's simply the more detailed categories. So Dasein in general, quality and something. The Ähnlichkeit, Finitude, we have something and something else, etwas und ein anderes, an other, something and an other. Determination, Beschaffenheit, I don't know how to translate this into English. And limit, the finitude or the finite, the immediacy of the finite or the finitude, the boundary, and das Sollen is the ought to. The finite ought to transcend its boundary. In ordinary language, in German language, it's das Sollen, die Schränke, die Endlichkeit, basically. The passage of the finite into the infinite. Here, the infinite in general, a reciprocal determination of the finite and the infinite, the affirmative infinity, or the affirmative infinity. Okay, so here it's the logical unfolding. Das für sich sein soll sich, Dasein und für sich sein, Sein für eines, being for one. It's not Sein für anderes, it's being for one. They are very subtle, these German metaphysicians. There is one, the one, eins. The one, an him selbst, it's not in itself, that cannot be translated. Das eins an ihm selbst. Yeah. The one and the void, or the emptiness. The many ones, repulsion. The exclusion of the one of the attraction. So it's not an error. Here it's really the one of attraction. If I could make a joke, maybe in some distant future, people, whatever, some might say, did you really have to complexify things to such an extent? Why did it have to be so complex? I've spent more than 2.5 years of my life in the mind of in the mind of Hegel. So if at some moment I become a little bit crazy, this might be one of the reasons. If I wanted to make a joke, I say one of the reasons, because there is one reason, but there are also many reasons. This is probably the one and the many that we've just seen earlier, or that we will see. Yeah, the one and the many here. But there is one reason. There are many reasons at the same time. Anyway. Okay, so here we have already seen this. So I do not take too much time. Here again, already seen, but it's simply the order is the logical unfolding. And here we have more subtle categories. The difference of extensive and intensive. So der selber means the difference of the notions that have just been mentioned, basically. The identity of extensive and intensive magnitude and the change of the quantum. The concept of the quantitative Unendlichkeit, the infinite quantitative progress, and the infinity of the quantum. Yeah. So when, I just illustrate very simply, but I have the intention of doing this more seriously, but when people say infinite growth on a planet with finite resources is impossible, infinite, finite, quantitative progress, these are determinations which are found in the logic of Hegel, basically. Okay, Potenzverhältnis, okay. Dritter Abschnitt, so I do not delve too long because we have already seen this, but here we have new, more subtle categories. The rule, die Regel, das spezifizierende Maß, Verhältnis beider Seiten als Qualitäten, the relation of both sides as qualities, basically. Okay, the real measure, being tied up, Verbindung means the connection, like in the tie, not the tie that people wearing smokings wear. The tie, the connection, the union. You get the idea if you are a native English-speaking person. The measure as the series of the relationships of measure. I cannot translate this into English. Wahlverwandtschaft, this is a novel by Goetz, basically. Okay. So here I go rather fast because we have already seen this. So now, zweites Buch, the doctrine of essence. We have already seen this in the first part of the video, so I do not need to comment or to pause too long. It's just to show how it is logically structured in the unfolding. So here we have die setzende Reflexion. It is the reflection which sets. Setzen means to set, basically. The outer or the exterior reflection and the determining Reflexion. Okay, here we have seen this already. Der absolute Unterschied, so the absolute difference, die Verschiedenheit, diversity, yeah, and Gegensatz. One of the reasons why there are tensions in multicultural society is because diversity eventually brings about opposition. It's logically determined, so to speak. Yeah, that's why I intend to do this. But when one understands this, that one is logically determined to be opposed to what is diverse, one thinks, okay, it was just a central planning, one might say, by God, basically. So this is one way of appeasing the tensions. I need to understand when the logical determinism is understood, one does not necessarily have to obey the rigorous logical determinism. This is a path towards liberation. That's what I'm trying to share. Not in this video here, I just showed the broad structure, but yeah. So here, form and essence, form and matter, form and content. So here, I talked about Aristotle earlier. The formal cause and the material cause, they are found here. So here it's partly the mind of Aristotle. Der bestimmte Grund, determinate ground, the formal ground, the real ground, and the complete or the completed ground. The condition, the relatively unconditioned, absolute or absolutely unconditioned, and the bringing forth of der Sache, of the thing, which is not das Ding, because there is etwas, das Ding und die Sache, the bringing forth of der Sache in the existence. I might understand why people sometimes struggle to understand Hegel, and why the typical Anglo-Saxon would rather say, we will not try to refute German metaphysician, we will just do our experiments and see if it is validated by experimental data, because by the time that we might have understood what Hegel was trying to say, let us make experiments. Yeah, it's I might have blamed you, my dear fellow Anglo-Saxon empiricist, but actually I understand that you might not want to be a German metaphysician all the time, that being on the field might be more satisfying from the perspective of a scientist. But then it depends on the circumstances, because there are some scientific experiments which are not always I understand myself. Okay, so Erscheinung, Existenz, the thing in itself and existence, the property, the reciprocal interaction of the things, but more seriously about science. This is how the scientific categories and the scientific world, which is the world of nature, eventually emerges out of the mind of God, basically. The law of phenomena, for instance. That's what I talked about earlier. The whole and the parts. Here I will just make a very brief comment. In order to apply an epistemologically valid method, very simple, you could just take one set of determinations, Reflexionsbestimmungen actually, and in order to know the truth about any topic, one has to know the whole and all its parts. That's the truth, the totality, all the parts, which constitutes the whole. It is valid for every investigation on any topic. The truth is the whole. Das Wahre ist das Ganze. It's very simple, actually. Yeah. So we have the being conditioned. Being is Sein. Condition is bedingt. So the fact that what is conditioned of the force, the solicitation of the force, the infinity of the force, basically. Okay. So we had Aristotle, now we have Spinoza, now we have Kant. But that's why there's worse thing, but I am quite ignorant in most philosophers, because why bother reading Aristotle, Kant, Spinoza, Leibniz? You just have to read Hegel, because he contains all other philosophers, so why bother? Yeah. Okay. The relationship, the Verhältnis der Substantialität, das Kausalitätsverhältnis, so the formal causality, the determined relationship of causality, action, reaction. This is a category, a pair of categories used by Newton and by physicists. Yeah. So here we enter the subjective logic. we have already seen this earlier. That's Urteil. So here we have positive judgment, negative judgment, infinite judgment, singular judgment, particular judgment, universal judgment. But here again, it works in English, French, and German. But here, singular can mean in English either singular or individual. Particular can mean plural or particular, and universal can indifferently, in a sense, used as general and universal. When people in ordinary conversation talk about special and general, what they mean is universal and particular. An individual is a singular. So that's why people spontaneously use logic, because they are rational, but it's one thing to use unconsciously logic and then to consciously master the determinations of one's mind in order to think properly about oneself in relation to God and about reality and about the relationship between God and reality, God and the world, basically. So, yeah. Here, we have again the table of judgments in the philosophy of Kant, which is also the categories or the judgments used by classical logicians. If then, we find this in how do you call this? Computer science, but in nature as well. So categorical judgment, hypothetical judgment, disjunctive judgments, assertoric judgment, problematic judgment, apodictic judgment. The four figures of the syllogism: singular, particular, universal, particular, singular, universal, singular, universal, particular, universal, 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 which is the mathematical syllogism. If two triangles are equal to a third triangle, they are equal between one another, so to speak. If this triangle is equal to this triangle, and if both these triangles are equal to this triangle, no, what was I saying? Yeah, if this triangle is equal to this triangle, and if this triangle is equal to this triangle, these two triangles are equal between one another. That's a mathematical syllogism. Syllogism of the totality of induction and analogy. Here we have the typical Anglo-Saxon mind: Locke, partly Hume, Mill, John Stuart Mill. So here are all the Anglo-Saxon philosophers and scientists. Yeah. Categorical syllogism, hypothetical syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. Okay, here we have seen this earlier. Formal mechanical process, real mechanical process, the product of the mechanical processes. The center, the law, the passage, or the going forth into another of mechanism, basically. Chemismus, we have seen this earlier. Teleology. So the four classical causes of Aristotle, which are taught in schools in the Western world, hopefully, are: efficient cause is the Grund, formal and material causes, form and content, or form and matter. We have seen this in the Logic of Essence. And the final cause, the purpose, the end goal, the Zweck in German, is here. So we have the four causes of Aristotle. But they are rigorously, systematically derived. Aristotle did this randomly, but he had an excuse. If one thinks in the historical context, he was very young, because the old thinkers are very young in the history of philosophy. So he was Aristotle was a child. People think Westerners are children of Aristotle. Actually, Aristotle is a child, and Hegel is an old man, intellectually. But actually, sometimes he can be quite entertaining. yeah. Here we have seen this earlier. The idea of cognition, analytical cognition or analytical knowing, synthetical knowing, definition, Einteilung und Lehrsatz. And here it's really important because one of the most fundamental problems, what is fundamental? I will not make a lecture on die Reflexionsbestimmungen, but one of the problems that the modern world suffers from is that which I understood with my own words 3 years ago, but then I thought, okay, these are my own words, so it's worthless, I would rather study Hegel, is that the world has lost its metaphysics. The Western world, but the world at large. There is no common code. And so that's why it's so important when one talks or thinks to first to define the words that are used, the ideas in the ordinary sense that they are supposed to express, the division of the notion that we use, this is what I call Bestimmtheit, and to define and to analyze what one talks about. To define, to divide by with Bestimmtheiten, and to rigorously, to talk as rigorously as possible. And that's why Hegel, the writings of Hegel are maybe the only rigorous and serious writings that can be found, because everything is defined rigorously, conceptualized, derived in an organic totality. So it's very clear. That's why Hegel seems to be the most obscure, unintelligible thinker ever, but actually it's very clear, because there is no ambiguity. I mean, there can be ambiguity in Hegel, but if one takes the time to focus, everything is clear. And that's why, I've already said this, but the more one studies Hegel, the more difficult it is to understand other minds. In a way, it's easier, but also it's more difficult, because when one picks up a book which is not written by a PhD, and even sometimes with books written by PhD, people use the language in ordinary sense without rigorously defining what they mean. So it can be quite confusing, because there is what the author wanted to say, what he said, what one believes that the author wants to say, what one who reads believes that the author says, what one understands, what the words that he used are supposed to mean. So that's why it can be quite exhausting just on an intellectual level. Yeah, and that's why the mind of God, here I'm not in a mood to make joke, is really, really complex, because the possibilities of interpretation, it's not possibilities actually, it's in order to understand it is necessary to understand, because possibility turns into necessity. I will not go back to the logic of essence. I don't know what to say, because the jokes which make me laugh, they are so far removed from... I'm not saying that my humor is better or worse, it's simply on a different level, not necessarily better, although I think it is, but look, it's very difficult sometimes to be me, whatever I am. So I have a lot of things to apologize for, but I will not apologize for laughing at speculative jokes, because sometimes well, anyway, I will not complain, but I will not. I do not feel sorry for laughing at purely speculative, abstract jokes, because they are really dubious things in reality. But yeah. I will make a joke partly inspired by Zizek, but I can imagine a party between Hegelians. They would be in an empty room, and they would just talk with pure logical determination, and they would exchange purely speculative jokes just in purely logical language. Have you heard the joke about the reciprocal determination of the formal bedingt Sein of the possibility? I will put a link by a song by Britney Spears to end on a positive note. You drive me crazy. Not you, Britney, although maybe you do, but Hagel maybe. You drive me crazy. Yeah, that's cultural Hegelianism, philosophy, pop culture, and mysticism in a way. But there is mysticism and mystification. I think it also exists in English. There's the mystical and the mystifying, and they sometimes sometimes they coincide, but yeah. I said to myself many months ago that I will publish my videos, except really when they have reasons not to publish them, but whatever I say, it's just people will, if they watch it, they will see what happens in my mind almost every day. I do not burst into laughter, but these mood shifts caused to the way I think. I laugh, but sometimes I genuinely laugh. Here I laugh because yeah, it's funny, but actually it's exhausting. It's well, let us end on a positive note with Britney Spears.